Okay. Hello, my name is Hannah Pritchard. Welcome to the ISS NGE webinar entitled Risk Assessment in Geotechnical Engineering that will be presented by Professor Zena Medina Cetina and Dr. Marco Fiali. Before we begin, I would like to mention that you are able to use the chat box to the right of your screen and send messages to me, or you may email me directly at hprichard@civil.camu.edu. There will be no question and answer session, but you may email your questions to me. I will send your questions to the presenters at the end of the webinar, and they will then answer them as they see fit by email. At the end of the webinar, I will administer a few feedback questions for you to answer if you wish to do so. This is a great opportunity to tell the ISSCGE any comments or suggestions regarding the webinar series. Now, I would like to introduce you to our speakers. First, we have Professor Zenon Medina Cetina, the Chastic Geomechanics Laboratory, SGL, at A&M University, College Station, Texas, USA. Professor Medina Cetina joined Texas A&M University as assistant professor in 2008 after holding a dual appointment at the International Center for Geohazards and Computational Geomechanics Division of the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute in Oslo, Norway from 2006 to 2008. He is a civil engineer from the Universidad Autónoma de Yucatán in Mexico with highest honors in soil mechanics. Obtained a Master's of Engineering from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico in 1996, Geostatistics, where he taught probability and statistics, and where he worked as a researcher and consultant at the Instituto de Ingeniería from 1996 to 2001. That year, Professor Medina Cetina was a recipient of a Fulbright Scholarship to pursue a Master's of Science and PhD at the Johns Hopkins University, where he graduated in 2006 with Chastic Mechanics. His research interests include Bayesian risk, reliability and feasibility analysis in geoengineering, stochastic geomechanics, uncertainty quantification of geoprocesses, and the probabilistic site characterization for integrated studies, geological, geophysical, and geotechnical. At Texas A&M University, Professor Medina Cetina has taught the introductory courses of mechanics and geotechnical engineering and the graduate courses geomechanics and stochastic mechanics. He holds an adjunct position at the Norwegian Scientific Computing Laboratory and is a full member of the Society of Underwater Technology and chair of the American Committee of Offshore Site Investigation and Geotechnics. He is a member of the ASCE Geo Institute GI Risk Assessment and the Management Committee of the Renewable Energy Committee of the Coast Ocean Sports and Rivers Institute, of the Society of Industrial Applied Mathematics, and of the American Statistical Association. Further information about Professor Medina Cetina's research interests, consulting, and publications can be found at his website, https://cevcross.civil.canu.edu/zmedina/index.htm. And speaking directly after Dr. Medina Cetina is Dr. Marco Uzzielli of Georisk Engineering, SRL, Italy. Dr. Uzzielli obtained his undergraduate degree in civil engineering from the University of Florence, Italy in 2000, and his PhD in geotechnical engineering from the same institution in 2004. He is a registered professional practicing engineer since 2001. In 2005, he was awarded a postdoctoral research fellowship at the International Center for Geohazards in Oslo, Norway. In 2008, he founded Georisk Engineering, a research-oriented technical consulting firm based in Florence, Italy. Dr. Uzzielli is the author of approximately 40 research publications appearing in international journals or proceedings of international conferences, and has been invited as a keynote speaker in prestigious international conferences. He is a member of the Italian Geotechnical Society, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and the Norwegian Geotechnical Society and Technical Committee 205, Safety and Reliability in Geotechnical Engineering, and 304, Forensic Geotechnical Engineering of the International Society of Soil Mechanics and Geotechnical Engineering. His main sectors of activity include geotechnical engineering and risk analysis. His current research consulting interests include geotechnical reliability analysis, Bayesian geostatistics, application of soft computing techniques to geotechnical systems, modeling of geotechnical uncertainty and spatial variability, probabilistic modeling or hazard, vulnerability and risk for natural and man-made hazards. And Dr. Uziali is a specialist consultant for the International Center for Geohazards, the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute, and the Center for Offshore Foundation Systems at the University of Western Australia. He has delivered lectures and seminars at numerous academic and professional institutions and maintains active research collaborations with European, United States, Australian, and Asian partners. Further information about Dr. Uziali's research interests, consulting, and publications can be found at his website, http://www.georisk.eu. And now I will turn Dr. Medina into the presenter.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. It's very nice to have the opportunity to make this presentation along with my colleague Marcus Thierry. Marcus came to visit Secretariat last year, and as part of this visit, I arranged a meeting with Professor Jean-Louis Briot, who, as you know, is president of our society. At the time, during an informal conversation, we expressed an interest in putting together a short course. And Professor Briot at the time said, hey, we're thinking about organizing a series of webinars. And would you consider making this short course idea into a webinar? And then we went through approval of our technical committee, and here we are. So I think we're very happy to have put together this presentation for you, and we really hope that you can enjoy it. Okay, so we're not going to talk about the presenters. I think I already did the introduction, so let's move on to the introduction. I would like to present two slides to what this system will do in terms of interest in engineering and perspective and in science in general. And let me start saying that the historic evolution of inference started with the first paradigm defined by empirical science, which describes natural phenomena. And this started over the last 2,000 years. And we started experimenting, looking at phenomena, trying to understand how things happen. Then the second paradigm is the theoretical science, which is based on models and generalization, and it's designed over the last few hundred years. And this is showing that after experimenting, having our senses in natural phenomena, we started to models and mathematics to try to represent what we were observing. Then the third paradigm is what is known as the computational science paradigm, which is done over the last decade. And this is directly related to the use of computers, computation. And now we have a fantastic opportunity. Now we have abundant availability of experimentation, instant processing technology. We have models that are already implemented in computers. And now the challenge is, okay, what are the best inferences that we can take from all these pieces of evidence? We can talk about this. The next slide is also a motivational slide that I take from a former advisor that was here today. He used to say, whenever there is a lot of evidence available to describe the process of interest, it's better if you estimate statistics. Whenever there is limited evidence available to describe the process of interest, you better use beautiful probability. And as you will notice in the following slide, we have a strong focus on the probabilistic approach, because because that's the nature of our work. We leave this is limited amount of information for the spatial dimensions that involve in historical law. Well, a systematic and rational state of the quantification that is related to the paradigms that we have for making things looks at to integrate the state of evidence of engineering process to institution method. So that's the end objective. So, and one way to integrate the state of evidence of engineering processes is by the use of risk assessment. And we are introducing the definition of risk as the product of concept, vulnerability, and elements of risk. And Marco is going to talk about this specific definition in great detail in the following slide. So I just mentioned how do we estimate? We need to look at the pieces of evidence and these are related to the paradigms that I mentioned. We take measurements, we make model predictions, and we also rely in our experience and the expertise. And as you're going to see in the rest of the presentation, each one of these pieces of evidence is what is going to help us within an uncertainty classification approach to have a saying about the state of safety in the definition of it. So how do we represent the state of evidence? Well, we do this by the use of statistics, probability, and there is something that is really fascinating, that is an emerging use of logical evidence and the use of scientific statistics. So the objective of this webinar is to provide a sound overview of the principles, methods, and implications of training geotechnical engineering practice within a quantitative risk assessment approach. And the approach that we have is we propose the use of geo-risk principles found in common practice established within the technical committees 62304, engineering practice of risk assessment and management of the International Society of Flow Mechanics and Technical Engineering. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. The biggest actually the reason why we're here today, because we want to promote the practice of engineering in terms of risk assessment and management. And our committee, the 62304, that is currently hosted by the Civil Society of Singapore, is has made a fantastic effort in pushing our practice to improve influences that can lead to better decision making in the technical engineering. So the short name of the society is known as WISP. It is referencing to the webpage. The student chair is Peter from Singapore, vice chair is Portion Center, and the secretary is Christine. We're really honored to be representing today the committee with this presentation. PC304 is charged with promoting and enhancing professional activities in geotechnical and environmental engineering in areas related to statistics and probability factors characterization, quantification of uncertainties in performance prediction, reliability-based design, risk-based decision analysis, calibration of NRSP accidents at the function, and project risk management. And as I mentioned before, our committee has made put a great effort in defining source of information and repository that we all can use. So I'm providing you some basic references, and we are adhering to what PC304 is training for the use of risk. So you can find guidelines, information, and technical resources. And recently it is also posted a summary of the safety concepts and calibration of hard structures in European and North American codes. This is a workshop held in 2001. And something that is of great use for everybody is the workshop, because that was one of the first main challenges the committee has when we was created. So we wanted to have a common vocabulary that we all can agree on, because risk, as you know, comes to deeper engineering and non-engineering I would like to have a quick perspective on how is it that we have evolved in terms of safety assessment. So as part of our practice, we want to ensure that the structures that we design or the natural process that we are in charge of understanding and forecasting are within some margin of safety. And let's start with one of the first two statistics that we use to define this state of safety. So this is the factor of safety that is still widely used in the clinical practice. And here I also want to apologize because some of the equations are misplaced a little bit. We had some issues when we did the translation from math to Revit. So I think that shouldn't be that relevant. So in this equation, as you know, the factor of safety is the ratio between R that represents the characteristic resistance strength and L that represents the sum of the characteristic load. This approach is related to the working stress design, also known as the level of stress design. And we know that failure occurs when the factor of safety is smaller than 1. The characteristic resistance in this case is computed by conservative estimate, while the characteristic load is the sum that's not as conservative. So we know that we rely more on the load estimate than the resistance strength estimate. Then, historically, there was a significant progress when the reliability index was defined. And this is based, again, on the definition of safety margin. And here I'm presenting two different definitions of safety margin. One is the one that is the difference between the strength of resistance minus the load. And then we have an equation describing what is that safety margin. And then we have the appearance for the first time in 1951 of what is known as the reliability index. That is a measure of the distance from the margin of safety 0 to the expected value of that margin of safety. If you multiply the reliability index times the standard deviation of when you're expecting that investigation of the safety margin, then we get the computation of the expected safety margin. And what we want is to push this expected value of the safety margin away from a value of 10 equal to 0. So, later, another definition of safety margin was introduced by Roosevelt and Estela on the Institute of Engineering in Mexico. It says it's defined in a different manner. We see that it's just the logarithm of the ratio between the strength versus the load. And as you can see, if we apply both for both definitions of the safety margin, we apply the forces method to come up with the specific definitions of the Fresnel index. We see that we obtain two different estimates. This was one of the main criticisms at the time of this specific definition of Fresnel reliability index. So we have two different definitions for the same concept. So to improve that definition, Capital we introduced what is known as the first order reliability method, which obviously I won't go into detail. I just wanted to put this into perspective. That now for any type of definition of a safety margin, we can get a consistent and unique estimation on what is known the reliability index set down to data. Now, irrespective of the definition of the data of reliability index, which is a measure of safety assessment, we can compute the probability of failure. And from the estimate of reliability index, we can compute the probability of failure as 1 minus what is a value of probability that is given by a suitable probability density function associated to the safety margin. So if we compute a reliability index, we can compute what is the probability the more recent efforts we've seen experiencing in the past few decades of the use of the low and resistant factor research. This is based on high reliability index, an expected low probability of failure. And this is now a very popular approach in the design code that we exercise everywhere around the world. This is simply designed as a factorization of the system with respect to the layers. So now we're factoring separately the contribution of the resistance and we're doing the same with respect to the contribution of the. And in this case, we have the resistance factor on the left, we have an important factor that varies depending on the type of structure, and then we have gamma subarc that is now the low factor. So this is what we see in practice today in terms of stress assessment. But obviously, this progress of systemic evolution has found some obvious limitations. And here I just want to stress out one of them. So, for example, if we want to compare the use of the factor of safety versus reliability index, so we know that if we use the factor of safety, all those frequencies is lumped into the factor of safety. We also know that the factor of safety, the choice of the factor of safety, also needs to find it in hundreds and it's definitely doing some code. It is strongly subjective. And what I want to address in this figure, or show in this figure, is we have three different conditions representing different degrees of uncertainty for the loads of the system that we can find on any standard mechanical design. And what we can observe is that the three of them are going to have the same factor of safety, that is a value of 2.4. But if we compute the reliability index, what we see is that for the same definition of factor of safety, different or varying condition of uncertainties and the definition of the loads of the resistor, we see a change in value in the beta definition. So here we have a value of 2.6, here a value of 2.7, here a value of 1.5, that is associated to an increase in uncertainty in the definition of the control wire. So so we all have assumed, and this is the reason why we see now this trend into LRSD and hopefully into a more consistent definition of safety assessment through a full definition of risk assessment as the one that we're going to present today. So this when we discuss sometimes in technical meetings, there is always this confusion between, so okay, what is the difference between reliability and risk? And based on what we had introduced, what I had introduced to start, I just want to express this out of it. Reliability is one minus the probability of failure. So we need to do a reliability analysis. We need to kind of estimate the reliability index so that we can compute reliability. So this is a probability estimate reflecting a safety margin dictated by the random trade-off between the loading of the observation and the resistance of current power. Whereas when we introduce the definition of risk, this is the product of half-life reliability and element of risk, and this is a prediction of the loss of cost for insurance performance in vulnerable elements, obtained via the estimation of half-life reliability. And as Martin will discuss in more detail in the following slide, we need to consider probability of failure, especially when we have a complex system to assess the half-life. So what risk is introducing here is the vulnerability of the system, and we do not take into account when we do reliability. And also, what would be the losses in case we have a failure. But I'm going to leave that to Michael. He's going to go into great detail in this technique. So, what makes the difference is the need for safety assessment. In reliability analysis, it responds to the need of assessing the analysis of the tested performance. And we use it for design purposes. So we need to compute probability of failure, give it an acceptable probability of failure, which is also a topic of great concern. What is acceptable or what is an acceptable probability? But we also use it for forensic analysis. So whenever we require to estimate the probability of failure, the interpret the factors, conditions, and responsibility for an estimate. So this is when we use analysis. Now, risk analysis responds to the need of assessing the state of safety in a period of one state of appearance. And this requires assessing the probability of failure, but for varying threat intensity, it requires the estimate of probability of the damage level, and it requires the estimation of cost and value. So we're ready now to go in depth about what is the current state of safety. I presented it before the evolution, factor safety, reliability,
Ladies and gentlemen, hello from Florence, Italy. I would first of all like to thank Professor Medina Sapina for inviting me to join in this webinar. I will be illustrating the rationale for risk, building on the brilliant historical perspective that Professor Medina Sapina has just given us. And the fundamental rationale from which the risk assessment, let's say, in addition to them, is that any engineering design or maintenance is referred to a target level of performance, whether implicitly or explicitly. When we design to achieve and ensure performance. And in most cases, through good design, we can ensure performance of the geotechnical. But there is always a cost in design, cost in construction, cost in maintenance. Of course, it would be desirable to make use of rational criteria for decision making, be it for design purposes or maintenance purposes. Why do we want rational criteria? Because we want to optimize the cost-benefit, cost-performance relationship in our design. Okay? This is a difficult task, as we all know, because absolute confidence in engineering estimates is unattainable in practice. Why? Because the physical world is uncertain, is heterogeneous, and our knowledge of the physical world is incomplete. So what we need to do is we need to acknowledge the existence of uncertainty. What is uncertainty? In an engineering sense, let's say, uncertainty describes any situation in which there is indetermination, in which we are not completely confident of the system we are addressing. Uncertainty is caused by a multitude of sources of confusion. There are many contributors to the total uncertainty. A part of the uncertainty is the real uncertainty or aleatory uncertainty. And real uncertainty means that, as I mentioned previously, the physical world is complex, is heterogeneous, both spatially and temporally. So the physical world changes from place to place and from time to time. That is the aleatory component of uncertainty. The epistemic component of uncertainty is due to our imperfect knowledge of the physical world, to our imperfect capability of modeling it, measuring it, and of processing it for engineering purposes. Okay, so if you would like to broadly categorize uncertainty, we could start aleatory, epistemic, and then we see the sub-contributors, each of the two macro categories. Epistemic uncertainty can be subcategorized into parameter uncertainty, so the uncertainty in the parameters which we use in our engineering design, and parameter uncertainty can further be subdivided into testing or measurement uncertainty and estimation uncertainty, which is the uncertainty in our engineering models. So in the models that we use to connect our measurements to our engineering design parameters. Okay, so this is a very broad categorization of uncertainty. Now, going into some detail into these contributors, we see aleatory uncertainty. As I mentioned, this is the real uncertainty. It's the uncertainty which, when modeled and parameterized for engineering purposes, reflects the complexity and the heterogeneity of the physical world. Now, we could broadly categorize aleatory uncertainty, or we say we could spot the causes for aleatory uncertainty in the spatial and temporal variability of the physical world. Spatial variability, of course, is due to the natural complexity and heterogeneity for the purposes of geotechnics, of the geologic environment. Okay? So depositional modification processes and so on. Temporal variability, for example, if we look at it from a risk perspective, so I think just a quick dive into the concept of vulnerability, there's a progressive decrease progressive increase, in vulnerability of the built environment with time. Okay? The resilience of the physical world tends to decrease as structures get older and so on. Then there is temporal variability in hazard factors. So, for example, factors which could trigger hazardous events, such as groundwater level, rainfall, etc. There are fluctuations in the value of vulnerable elements. Okay? And aleatory uncertainty can be addressed and modeled quantitatively using appropriate mathematics. For example, statistics, probability, and so on. For epistemic uncertainty, one of the contributors is the testing or measurement uncertainty. As we all know, any in situ or laboratory testing method is imprecise and inaccurate to some degree, no matter how well the instrument is built and how satisfied we could be with the reproducibility of the result. And the imprecise and inaccurate nature of measurements is due to the physical limitations of measuring instrumentation and techniques, the operator errors, calibration errors, environmental conditions, random testing effects. Okay, there is a literature on this, and I would like to point out the target analogy, which highlights the difference between precision and accuracy, which are two different concepts. Then we have estimation uncertainty. We always complain as geotechnical engineers that we don't have enough data, that we'd like to know our subsoil better. And in technical terms, we call this estimation uncertainty. So due mainly to economic constraints, the number of data we have, the amount of data we have, are never really sufficient for very confident characterization of the subsoil. And of course, it is estimates of soil properties are less confident where you don't measure where you don't perform a test. However, techniques are available to estimate properties at unsampled locations, and also very importantly, in our uncertainty-based approach, it is also possible to quantify the uncertainty associated with the estimation at unsampled locations. So, for example, through geostatistical kriging, you can estimate the values of properties of interest at unsampled locations, provided that you have measurements, of course, at other locations. And you can also quantify the uncertainty associated with these estimates. Lastly, but not least, transformation uncertainty. So we rely on engineering models which transform our measurements into engineering parameters. Now, whether these models are theoretical, empirical, experimental, they are never perfect. In the case of theoretical models, the imperfection is due to the fact that theoretical models simplify, approximate the physical world, and therefore we do lose some precision and some accuracy. In the case, for example, of empirical models, when we relate for example, two quantities, such as the shear strength, grain strength, and an FPT value, you see that there is always scatter in data, so we never get a perfect relationship. And when we do formulate a model, in this case, the nonlinear Okay, so living with uncertainty, what do we do? What should we do acknowledging the existence of uncertainty? First of all, uncertainty cannot be eliminated completely. Why? Because aleatory uncertainty is real. Its magnitude can be changed artificially by defining different reference systems, return periods, or the say resolution of the analysis, but it will still be there. Epistemic uncertainty cannot be reduced completely, cannot be eliminated completely in practice, because, as we said previously, there are physical limits to the accuracy and precision of measurements. The uncertainty associated with engineering models cannot be reduced indefinitely. And moreover, for practical purposes, it is rationally not justified to reduce epistemic uncertainty as much as possible. What we should realize is that we should select a target level of uncertainty which is compatible with our engineering design, but which does not make us spend too much or use too much resources to achieve this reduction in uncertainty. Okay, so what do we do when we want to live in uncertainty? We select a suitable target level of confidence in our engineering parameters, and we pursue engineering analysis and design with reference to such target level. We are aided in this by mathematics and not less important with engineering knowledge, of course. Renan and I today will be presenting a lot of formula and numbers, but of course, engineering knowledge assessments must never be put aside, even when using these mathematics. So what we can do when we realize that uncertainty exists is we can neglect it, so we can't do that because that's unacceptable. We can implicitly account for indiscrimination, and by doing that, we're performing so-called deterministic analysis, which is basically what Zanon mentioned in the earlier stage the state factor safety was the sole means of characterizing or expressing the target degree of conservatism. That is what it is. And that is acceptable, of course, if it's well performed. However, if we want to rely on uncertainty-based approaches, what we can try to do, and what we should try to do, is to provide an improved and more rational and rigorous attempt to attain a target level of reliability and risk while optimizing cost. So we can actually use the presence of uncertainty to rationalize our target level of conservatism and optimize our cost performance ratio. So the scopes of geotechnical risk management basically are first and foremost rational estimation of the likelihood of adverse consequence of natural or man-made phenomena on human valued assets. Okay, so we want to know how likely it is that our system will be challenged by adverse events. We would like to have a rational basis for decision making regarding the implementation of measures which may reduce and mitigate risk. And we, of course, would like to optimize the performance of our geotechnical system while minimizing costs of planning, design, construction, and mitigation. How can we do this? If we rely on a risk-based perspective, we can approach a risk framework which would provide an insight into the nature and implications of uncertainty. We would like to illustrate the conceptual foundations of risk analysis for you. We would like to present a probabilistic framework for the quantitative estimation and assessment of direct geotechnical risk, and I will explain what that means. And we would like to illustrate today the decision-making process for geotechnical risk management and probabilistic. Okay, you may be acquainted with this flowchart. This is basically a glossary of risk management because as Zanon mentioned earlier, the glossary is a fundamental aspect in risk community today. There are many risk approaches there are many frameworks for estimating risk. And the truth is that people have been using different terminologies to define the same things or the same concept. And of course, the results are a lower degree of communication, of transmission of results, and therefore a lower utility of the output of these analysis. Okay, so I would like just to give you the reference glossary that we will be using, which is the one drafted by T3 or 4. And in this flowchart, we see that the first step is always to define tolerable, acceptable risk levels. And these are due to social, environmental conditions, cultural factors, resource availability, availability of data, regulation. Okay? Once we have defined these, we can do a preliminary scoping of our risk analysis, of our risk-based approach. And the preliminary scoping entails the selection of a suitable resolution and the definition of the reference system, so the object of our risk analysis. This is a very important thing because it allows us to optimize the allocation of resources since the beginning of our analysis. Okay? Once we do our preliminary scoping, we proceed towards the risk estimation. Okay? And the risk estimation consists of several modules, conceptually and operationally. So, hazard analysis, vulnerability, hazard analysis, vulnerability analysis, and the analysis of elements at risk. So the three macro factors of risk, which will lead us to the definition of consequence, which put together with the hazard, allows us to estimate risk. Okay, so risk estimation is the process by which we obtain a measure of the level of risk to one or more categories of vulnerable elements. By categories of vulnerable elements, I mean different components of the human values world, people, structures, infrastructures, and so on. Once we have our risk estimates, what we would like to do, what we need to do, if we want to use our estimates practically, we would like to compare is our tolerable or acceptable risk level. So is the risk that we have estimated compatible with our preset thresholds? Okay, this is the risk assessment or evaluation phase. We compare the risk estimates with our tolerable or acceptable risk. And based on the outcome of the risk assessment, we need to manage risk. So we need to mitigate or not mitigate it. We need to implement, plan, countermeasures, or the system is fine as it is, and then we leave it as it is. Okay? Approaches to risk analysis. I mentioned earlier that there have been and there are many, many approaches to risk analysis, which can be categorized broadly into qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis. It is intuitive to see that qualitative risk analysis uses word verbal descriptions, numeric rating scales, which, however, are not the outcome of, let's say, mathematical processing, to describe the magnitude of potential consequences and the likelihood that those consequences will occur. So hazard, vulnerability, elements at risk are described in a non-strictly quantitative way. Opposed to qualitative risk analysis, we have quantitative risk analysis. And quantitative risk analysis, or QRA, is based on numerical values of probability, vulnerability, and consequences, and resulting in a numerical value of the risk. So when you perform QRA, you get numbers which are repeatable. If you have the same input data, the same model, you will get the same output. Now, the advantages of quantitative risk analysis, provided that it's well performed, are that it allows for a more objective and repeatable estimation. It provides a more effective basis for communication of results, because results can be backed up, motivated, compared. And this comparison is important because it allows for the hierarchization of assessment. So you are a decision maker and you need to prioritize the implementation of mitigation methods in one area or the other. Through QRA, you have a more objective criterion to define your priorities and therefore to operate in terms of mitigation. Another way in which we can categorize risk is direct versus indirect. Direct risk is related to the physical interaction between the hazardous events or agents and the vulnerable elements. Okay? So, for example, direct risk includes structural damage or fatalities due to the failure of geotechnical systems. Indirect risk, on the other hand, is related to delayed consequences of the interaction. So, what happens in the aftermath? For example, downtime or damaged industrial facilities, or the psychological trauma of survivors. Okay, so these are two say macro categories of risk in terms of the direct or indirect relation with the damaging agent, the direct or indirect interaction, okay, in physical terms. And I'd like to point out that indirect risk is not strictly an engineering issue. It involves a lot of economic analysis and so on. Direct risk, on the other hand, is more directly related to the engineering discipline. Sanon introduced our conceptual framework for risk in introduction and already mentioned the existence of the macro factors of risk, which are hazard, vulnerability, and the elements of risk. Okay? So let's go into greater detail and define our risk framework more in detail. First of all, danger, threats. We can define it, or ISSMD, the TC304 has defined it as a natural phenomenon that could lead to damage described in terms of some attributes. So geometry, maybe, velocity. So anything that can cause damage to a physical system is potentially a danger or threat. Hazard. How do we define hazard? We define hazard as the probability that a threat of a given intensity occurs within a given period of time. So we need to select a reference period for our risk estimate, and we want to quantify the probability that a threat of a particular intensity will occur in that reference period. Our definition of vulnerability is that of a degree of loss to a given element or a set of elements within the reference system, so within an area that we have defined that we expect to be affected by a hazardous event. And given this definition, vulnerability is expressed on a scale from 0, means no loss at all, to 1, total loss. Our elements at risk parameter represents the value repair or maintenance costs of vulnerable assets. Why are repair maintenance costs? Because risk is also very important in a planning perspective. So we do not only want to know what the loss is going to be in our system, but we also want to know how much it will cost us to maintain a desired target level of performance of the system. And if you look at the equation up here, where risk is given by the product of hazard, vulnerability, and elements of risk, and if you look at the three definitions that we've given, then we see that risk is basically the likelihood or probability of an adverse event times if the event occurs. Okay? So even from a conceptual perspective, we need to get our risk factor, our risk glossary straight and be consistent. We also need to be careful about the units of risk. Based on the definitions that we've given, we define hazard as a probability, so basically the units probability per reference time. So basically, P is the probability value, so no units, times minus 1. Okay? Vulnerability is, again, a degree of loss, so no units. And E depends, the units with which we measure E depends on the nature of the vulnerable element. For example, if we are dealing with people, the value of people, the way in which we parameterize the value of people when we're doing technical risk analysis is a number of lives. If we are dealing with physical environments, so the built environment structures, we could define value in monetary terms. If we are looking at an environmental risk analysis, we might want to see how many trees will be potentially affected by, say, a landslide. Okay? And if we do some unit algebra, we see that the units for risk are probability over time times value. So we need to be very careful and be consistent with our units as well. Why is this important? Because in the past, as Manon has pointed out, risk used to be used in a predominantly hazard-based perspective. So there was a lot of confusion between hazard and risk. We want to stress out that risk also entails a value, not only a probability per time. Okay? Okay, we've seen the conceptual framework which we're going to rely on, and now we would also like to go into the operational aspect of risk analysis. To go back to the conceptual framework, just to say that risk is equal to hazard times vulnerability times elements at risk, we can define consequence as products of vulnerability and elements at risk, and jumping into our quantitative perspective, we can define this as the product of these three conditional probability terms. Okay, so the first term gives us the probability of the occurrence of a threat at a given intensity W in a given period of time, times the probability of the spatial impact of the threat of the given intensity W on the location of the vulnerable element, given the certainty of the occurrence of the threat. Okay, so this gives us our hazard. So the event not only has to occur, but it has to affect the vulnerable elements if we want to quantify risk. Then we have our vulnerability, and transposing the definition which we've seen previously into our probabilistic perspective, we can define probability as vulnerability, as the probability of attaining a given level of damage B in the reference vulnerable element, given the certainty of the occurrence of the spatial impact threat of intensity. Okay, so this is our definition of vulnerability. Elements at risk is the cost, as we said previously, expressed in appropriate units of the reference vulnerable element, given the attainment of its given damage level. Okay, so what will be the repair cost in a building if the damage is low? What will it be if the damage is medium? What will it be if the damage is high? So it is important to define our damage levels, our reference damage levels, and to associate a cost, repair, or maintenance to each level. Now, the same reference framework here can be applied operationally in more than one way, and today we're going to show you two methods which we will call full and simplified methods. You will see that they are both consistent with this, it's only that operationally they are implemented a little bit. Let's start with the full formulation, and what you see here are three risk factor functions. You remember that at the basis of everything was the existence of a threat. Now, what we want to do when we characterize these risk factor functions is we want to find models which give us the probability of attaining, let's say, in the case of hazard, the probability of occurrence, as we said, of an event, of an adverse event of a given intensity level. Now, intuitively, you can see that the relation with intensity is inverse. So the lower the intensity, the higher the probability that you will experience a threat of that intensity. Okay? Vulnerability has the opposite behavior. So we see here the vulnerability functions. Each of the vulnerability curves that you see here relates to unique damage level. So in this case, we have damage level 3, which is the highest, and damage level 1, which is the lowest. So you see, if you remember the definition of vulnerability as the probability of attaining of a a given damage level with intensity, you see that the relationship in this case is direct. Okay? And then we have cost functions, which are generally invariant to intensity, and they only depend on the level of damage. So as I mentioned previously, our cost is expected to be higher for a higher damage level because it would take more resources to repair or strengthen our vulnerable elements. But what I would like to stress out is that we are defining quantitative functions for three risk factors. Okay? And this definition of these risk factor functions are also valid for the simplified formulation that we will use later on. In our full formulation, we need to define a parameter which is called differential vulnerability. So if you look at these three vulnerability curves, which are basically the ones we saw earlier, what we can do is we can take the difference between consecutive vulnerability curves, and we can define this difference as differential vulnerability. Now, differential vulnerability gives us the probability of being in a damaged state for a given level of intensity. This is the quantitative definition for differential vulnerability, so it's the difference between consecutive vulnerability values for a given intensity level, except for the last one, which is basically corresponds to the vulnerability curve. Okay, so the number of vulnerability curves which you can define is up to you, and the way in which you define them is up to you. But when you calculate differential vulnerability, then you are constrained by the vulnerability curve that you have modeled previously. And how do you use these differential vulnerability curves? What you do is you basically, for each of the damage levels, you multiply the differential vulnerability times the cost, and you obtain this C or delta C, so the delta constant, which pertains to the given damage level. You sum up the consequences for all the damage levels, and you get your total consequence. Once you get your total consequence, you multiply by the hazard, and you obtain risk. Okay, so here's the formula up here. Risk is a function of intensity, because for each value of intensity, we obtain a value of expected risk. And it is also a function of the period, because hazard will be a function of the period. So we can take hazard out, and we can see the summation here, so the consequences over all the damage levels. Okay, we have n damage levels, we have summation, convolution over J, and this is our extended formulation of the stable method. Okay, so here's the hazard, here's the vulnerability, here are the elements of risk. What you obtain, once again, is the variation with risk with intensity level. Why does risk increase and then decrease again with increasing intensity? Because vulnerability is low for low intensity, and hazard is high, but vulnerability is low. For intermediate values of intensity, you have intermediate values of hazard and intermediate values of consequence, so you sort of maximize this. And then for higher intensity values, you have a very low hazard, which brings your risk down again to low levels. Okay, so there is an intensity which is usually intermediate, which gives you maximum risk. Why is risk period dependent? Because hazard is period dependent, not only, but also vulnerability is period dependent. As I mentioned, the resilience of the built environment tends to decrease, or for people as well, for that matter. It increases with age at the beginning of life, and then it decreases again. So if you apply this formulation to different return periods, you obtain three different risk curves, which usually increase with periods because your hazard will increase with reference period. Okay? In our simplified formulation, we are still making use of the risk factor function, but instead of convoluting on the damage levels, what we do is we are basically convoluting on intensity. So we have the summation over our M intensity level. We still need the probability of occurrence of a vector intensity Wi, and we still need the conditional probability of attaining the J damage level given the occurrence of the threat. However, we multiply these right away, and subsequently we also have the summation over damage level. Okay, so basically, in our generalized case of the simplified framework, what we do not get with respect to the previous method is an explicit intensity dependent curve. So we don't get the type of curve that we were getting here, but you get a single estimate of the expected risk, which is exactly what you would get in the um, in the full method if you were to sum overall values of intensity. So of course the two methods yield the same value provided that the risk factor functions are the same. However, you obtain these differences. You can also have a single damage level, of course. In this case, formulation has this simplified expression. Okay? So you don't have the summation over all the damage levels. Okay, comparison of the two methods. The full method allows for the explicit characterization of risk as a function of intensity. Consequence is estimated separately for each damage level and separately from hazards. So hazard is brought in at the end once the total consequence is calculated. And total risk is obtained by summing up the intensity specific risk. In the simplified model, on the other hand, you don't need calculation of the differentials in vulnerability. As you've seen, we don't use the differential vulnerability parameter in the simplified case. And risk is calculated at each intensity level, whereby total risk is obtained by summing the intensity specific risk. Okay? Once again. Both methods, of course, provide an estimate of expected risk for a principal tendency value and required for the risk of modeling of the risk factors HB and E. Once we have estimated risk, we need to assess it. Okay? So for the purpose of decision making, we need to compare our risk estimate with the tolerable or acceptable risk that we have set as our dividing threshold. Okay, for action and non-action. Let's say that risk acceptance and risk tolerance is a complex system in itself, and it is a complex product of the aggregate assessing of several categories of economic, political, social, regulatory, cultural, and ethical factors. So it's difficult to define an acceptable risk, a tolerable risk, and so on. There are methods, there are diagrams which help us in reviewing the issue of risk acceptability and tolerance. And one of such diagrams is shown here. On the x-axis, you have the value of your vulnerable element. On the y-axis, you have your risk level. And based on the combination of the two, you would be able to define where your risk estimates belong. So, for example, in case of a value, let's say, of the value of an asset, which ranks here, along here, and a risk estimate around here, you would be in a situation in which your risk is unacceptable, so you would need to mitigate. There are other sections of this diagram, other areas of this diagram, which indicate that risk is broadly acceptable, risk needs to be scrutinized, or you are in the alert area. So alert refers to the as low as reasonably practicable, and the ISFMG glossary states that risks lower than the limit of tolerability are tolerable only if risk reduction is impracticable, or if it costs grossly in disproportion to the improvement gain. So even if we do manage to reduce risk, but we spend too much to reduce it, then is it really worth mitigating? Okay? We can use these diagrams in a quantitative way. So these are very useful in our risk assessment phase. If we assess the risk to be too high, we can try to mitigate the risk. And risk mitigation entails the selective application of appropriate techniques and management principles to reduce either the likelihood of the hazard or its adverse consequences, so vulnerability. Okay, there are two types basically of mitigation that you can bring. Active mitigation and passive mitigation. Let's see what these are. There you have a pre-mitigation risk estimate. So your R0 is given by the product of your H0, your vulnerability 0, and your pre-mitigation phase. Then you compare your R0 with your tolerable acceptable risk. And you say, no, I need to do something about it. What do I do? I can decide whether I want to reduce the hazard. In this case, you are doing an active mitigation. You then obtain R prime A, where you have changed H prime, H0 to H prime. And vulnerability has stayed the same. You might get a variation in the value of your elements of risk because due to the fact that you have reduced the hazard, maybe a house could increase the value. But you also have the cost of implementing the countermeasures, which is a certain cost, and which brings your risk up. If you see risk as the cost of maintenance and the preservation of performance. Or you can also decide to do a passive mitigation. So you don't act on the reduction of hazard, but you act on the reduction of vulnerability. Okay, so you have an R prime P, in which the H is equal to the pre-mitigation case. We have a B prime P, which is lower than the 0, and you might also have a variation in your value. Okay, plus you have the cost of implementation of the countermeasure. You can also do both. You can also do active plus passive mitigation. And in this case, the residual risk is calculated using an updated hazard, an updated vulnerability, and a possibly updated value, and of course, the value of implementing the countermeasure. Now, if you start from a situation where you have an R0 here, and you assume that your value is more or less the same, let's see where your residual risk go. You might have countermeasures which do reduce your hazard, your vulnerability, but which may be too expensive. So the result is that you're globally increasing the risk. And that is a situation, of course, in which the rational decision is not to mitigate in this way. So you must look for an alternative scenario of risk mitigation, which could be, for example, this one over here, in which you have reduced hazard, you have reduced vulnerability, and your countermeasures are not that expensive, but to increase the residual risk. Okay? So these are the scenarios which can occur in a quantitative perspective, and which are quite clearly visible in diagrams such as this. I give back the word to Zenon, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, both Dr. Medina and Dr. Uziali, for doing a wonderful presentation on the ISSNG webinar about risk assessment and geotechnical engineering. I would like to thank everyone for attending. And yes. Oh yes, I forgot. Let me make you the presenter.
Okay, let's now that we have the clear definition of a risk framework, what I want to go and what are the elements that we take into consideration, the technical elements that we take into consideration every time that we do risk estimation. So here we have on the top and modeling risk factors. So we have asset vulnerability and consequence. So if we start with capital estimation, we might be concerned about three broader areas that are directly related to capital estimation. Because in technical world, all that is related to the global and local stability, we're talking about block angle, solar rock shear, stone rock strength, surface irregularity, topography, 2D, 3D, and sign effect. The second broader area of capital estimation is what is related to stress increment. So sometimes we have upslope deposition and downslope erosion that is going to have and generate a concentration of stresses that can push our structural margin to the limit. And this might also be caused by local erosion, natural events, past events versus etc. And effects related to field installation and non-induced activity. The third broader area that we need to take into consideration when we do capital estimation is not when we have global aspects of design or stress issues taking into consideration, but stress reduction. So this is the case when we have an accumulation of forward pressure to site activity, for example, or multiplication of forward pressure. Then we have very low permeability. Then we have cases of greater on constructive force, factor shifter variation, potential strengthening of traffic force, water level variation, and effective on the consolidation. So these three broad areas are related to hazard estimation in terms of technical knowledge. In terms of vulnerability estimation, this is a very complex process. And this is a very active research field now because to build a vulnerability curve that is associated with a geostructure or a geoprocess, you need to find a correlation of threat intensity directed to different states of damage. And in natural processes, we cannot control the experiment, but we might just define a land fire, a rock fire, or even in a more controlled environment, like on a construction site, it's difficult to replicate the experience of building a foundation and to control the different damage that are associated with that. So this hypothesis of defective probability sometimes is not that realistic when we build vulnerability curves. So there is a great challenge in the definition of the vulnerability curve. And in addition to that, we have limited amounts of data. But the good news is that we're observing something that is very promising, that is the emerging of new technologies, especially for large-scale events. We can use graphical information systems, trace regional, local disease of damage after the peak of a specific threat, and even at the local level, at the use of microtransducers that can be installed and use the building so that we can trace what is the peak of damage associated with the threat. And finally, we talked about what are the chemical issues associated with elements of risk, the estimation of elements of risk. The first thing, and more relevant challenge associated with the estimation of elements of risk is that this is an interdisciplinary approach. So sometimes we define our risk in terms of social impact. We have large losses, for example, or as Mark mentioned, we're looking at maintenance, which is concentrate only on the economical definition of risk or the environmental definition of risk. And sometimes risk is a dynamic process. So it might be changing the rest of the time. So the training that we presented now is this for a specific participant, there is a specific period of time, but if this state of risk that is associated to a state assessment changes the rest of the time, we may just take that into consideration. And obviously, the state potential, the spatial contribution to the same variability on the technical element. And here on the right-hand side, I have a couple of figures. One that is representing the historic population growth. This is the global densification of population in an area that was defined as a low-risk area in the past. Just by the fact that now we have more people living in one specific area, we're automatically increasing the probability. So if we look at the equation, with respect to time, we have an increase in the population, an increase in the value of this particular structure of phenomena that we're trying to assess in terms of risk. We have a natural increase in the value of this. So this is the past growth, and here is our prediction about what would be the increase of the population in the future. So just by doing nothing in terms of life losses associated to natural hazards, we are expecting to see a gradual increase of this. Just now to finish the presentation, I'll present a case study that I was involved with, that I was working at the Geotechnical Institute. And here's the work that was led by many architects and probably a dozen of other experts. Here, this is a very complex problem. We try to tackle using the same risks that Marco presented in great detail and clarity. And here we see that we have a rock slide that is located in Tokyo, in Norway, and if it falls, it might generate a tsunami that will basically wipe out all the populations around it. So here you have a figure that is indicating where the rock slide is located and the different populations around it that might be affected. So we know that it's an active rock slide because as you will see in the next slide, we know that the rock slide is moving. And two different methodologies were supposed to be found to generate a risk assessment. So the first one is what is related to the concept of risk expectation, that is the same as the simplified risk estimate method Marco presented. And I'll also present my contribution to this analysis, that is the use of the Bayesian risk, which is also an emerging field that is trying to better define a stability classification framework where we can look not only at the definition of the impact of risk in a functional manner, but also in terms of diagnosis and prognosis once that we have a correct classification of the certainty of the problem. But I'll show you this in the following slide. So the main interest here was to look at what would be the risk in terms of life losses at four different locations that were close or that are located close to the actual site. So in terms of evidence collection, this is one of the most highly studied rock slides in the world. There is significant effort, I would say, to try to observe and generate what would it potentially be potentially in terms of the risk estimation, and the same with numerical model. So let's start with the first component of this. So in this particular case, we wanted to have an assessment of conflict. And here we have a multi-thread that is independent. We have the potential fouling of the rock slide. And then if the rock slide fall, then we have the potential generation of a tsunami. So let's start with the rock slide. So here we look at frequency analysis of rock slide. Here we're looking at the order of magnitude of cubic meters versus frequency per year in series of time per thousand years. And first, we conducted a global review. So we look at what are the different rock failure mechanisms that we can find globally. And then we look at specific past events, rock fault past events that were located in the region within rock facility. But this allows to compute volumes of material that were deposited in the field associated with past rock. Also in terms of partial assessment, so we have global literature investigation, we have the local facility investigation that allows us to the region what was the frequency and orbital magnitude of the rock site. But we also have information about the rock site on the site. So and here what we can see from this specific picture is a block analysis can help us to define what would be the rock slide in the mechanism. So from the in-situ investigation, it is possible to define a number of or identify in terms of regions located on the rock slide what would be the potential volume that we might expect for this specific rock slide that we know that is moving. So based on these two different sources of evidence, we can compute first nano failure probability curve that is defining what is the corresponding probability of failure per year with respect to the volume associated with that particular event. And here we see two curves. The first one is associated to the information that was collected from the stock facility investigation. And the second curve is the curve that was generated based on the expert analysis of the actual kinematics of the rock slide. So you can see these are past events that is showing a more conservative definition of the reality of the actual falling of the rock slide versus not that conservative assessment in terms of the definition of the hazard because we know that this rock slide is moving. So that's why the order of magnitude of the probability of failure associated with this rock slide. So in terms of practical matter, we define a different intensity levels that are associated with different volume intervals. And here you see the corresponding values that are represented in this curve. So it is possible to define the different range of volume what would be the corresponding probability. Now, in terms of the tsunami, the aspect of assessment related to tsunami is based on numerical simulation. And the numerical model that we use is based on a simplified linear solid water model. The focus was both on the acceleration of propagation of the tsunami, which is something that the model allows, and the model is based on the definition of a flexible bond that falls into the field for different varying conditions of fall. So here we have the parameters in the model that were used to incorporate into the model to make predictions about the rate of propagation along the field, where the block volume, the impact velocity of the drop, and the runoff length. So here on the table you can see for different varying conditions or different intensities or daily intensities that we prescribe for the different probabilities of failure location of the rock site, and this is the corresponding maximum surface elevation and runoff tsunami that is basically concentrated here in an order of about 6 meters. And that as the wave is propagated, you see that there is a critical impact on the locations that are on this L shape of the field. That this allows to estimate what will be the direct impact directed to the elemental risk. And as part of the consequence assessment, we need to define what is the corresponding vulnerability of on each one of these specific counts where we were trying to assess the value of this. So here, for the assumptions that we make for vulnerability assessment at each one of these counts is that only vulnerability assessment is here. There is a single damage level related to fatality. The inundation height is the control parameter for the tsunami intensity of vulnerability, which you can see represented here. So here is the parameter that is controlling what is going to impact the elements of this. And then we conduct frequency analysis on the corresponding losses based on a global analysis from the literature and also from a local analysis that was conducted of tsunamis that have been reported in the area and the corresponding life losses that are associated with that, to those tsunamis. So based on that, using an inverse power law, we define a function that is going to try to represent what is the state of vulnerability for different inundation types, and that is ultimately a consequence of the different volumes of the rock but as you can see, the scaling of the data from top to define would be an upper bound and a lower bound of the vulnerability of each one of these types. So we introduce a function that is trying to keep the different data from global statistics, from local statistics, so that we can have a comprehensive view at least of what would be the most likely scenario for the vulnerability of these so here we define, based on the propagation of the tsunami, of each one of the conditions of volumes that we're expecting to find when rockfall falls, we can define what will be the corresponding state of vulnerability at each one of the locations we're conducting the risk estimation. So based on so we have now our hazard assessment completed. We have our vulnerability assessment completed, estimation completed. Now we're gonna define or introduce what will be the element of this, which is the first factor for the definition of this. And here we have the assumptions that were made at each one of the four sites. So we conducted the estimation is that so we conducted one per location. It was based on the number of people present in the whole area, average over time. It was assumed that inhabitants are tourists because this is one of the most notable tourist attractions in Norway. So we assume that this has spent 50% of the time in the tourist area. And we assume that the tourist people last month is about one fourth the present of the maximum number of people at the time. So in this table we can see what are the values that we're introducing, so that we're estimating the number of people that could be exposed to our elements of this one of these. So finally, using our risk estimation formulation, we simplified approach the micro percentage for the seven different levels of intensity that are defined by the different ranges of volumes of rockfall that we're expected to, let's say, if the rockfall fully developed, then we can conduct finally an estimation of the here for each location, we have the load time, the hard time that is associated with the risk estimate that is computed also to each one of the threat intensity. And just by looking at the result, you can see the order of magnitude respectively of number of life losses. We can see based on the information that is for the overtime is one for directly and directly. And this is at the time that we do the computation, we can see that this is strongly related because of the location of the site, the locations that are closer to the rock body, but also to the number of people that we expose in the event of the rock. Okay, so just to finish the presentation, I would like to introduce what I think would be the future in terms of this estimation. And we introduce as an exercise what is called Bayesian risk estimation. And I just want to go very quickly on some of the properties of this new approach that I can tell that is getting popularity because of simplicity and because also follows the same risk framework that market has. So here we have an additional element that we introduce into this assessment that is called value. And we typically do not use when we formulate our risk assessment analysis. This is a graphical model that helps us to do some reasoning on the efficiency. So each node represents different events, and the arcs represent the dependency. And something that helps a lot in this formulation is with the part from the video that reasoning, if you do this, then it's going to happen. If you not do this, it's not going to happen. So with the part from that condition, because now at each one of these nodes, we have a true probability density that is describing the most likely what will be the transmission of information. So what we want to do is the aim of predicting effect of sudden interpretation of changes, but that is exactly what happens. Because if we look at the whole picture, we do not start from the potential failure of the rock. We start from changes in the water system. It might generate normal, it might generate precipitation that might help increase the forward pressure that might precipitate the rock. We have a snow melt. We might also have a deterioration in the material composition that might trigger the rock. So in a very simplistic manner, we also see that are the indirect elements of threat that are associated to our core threat, that is the potential rock, and then the generation of it. But also we can incorporate what is what are the flow of information in the early warning system as a mitigating action that can help us to minimize the consequences and then minimize them. So these are generalized models that we implemented in a simple manner using simple models. And here on the right hand side, you can see what I call the mathematical formulation that is behind the spatial network. But I won't discuss in detail, but you can see that represents the spatial approach that we define for this framework. So just as a matter of comparison, this was something really interesting because in order for you to provide value to each one of these nodes, so we are representing the state of knowledge about each one of the events that are present in the spatial network, we can now see a comparison on the results. So we have a comparison between the historic assessment of the risk estimation in workplace and historic data that I presented before with reference to the ones that introduce the strategy and that gives wider impact on what is the input from the expert. So you can see that there is a significant increase in the perception of this, and mainly because and that is basically the prognosis. So we propagate the disease association in the forward direction. But something beautiful about this approach is that it allows you to do the inverse process. So if we define, so in each one of these columns here, when we are presenting is the different intensities and the different runoff probabilities for different prescribed values. So if we want to go in the inverse direction and say, for example, I want to know what is the probability of having a distribution of intensities of voxel tolerance and the corresponding distribution of runoff, so that we can achieve the total number of fatalities. Then we can evaluate this table that is representing a probability distribution. What would be the most likely scenarios to lead to this target? In this case, you see we have a maximum value of probability associated to this specific intensity on the wall. So this basically concludes, I think, our presentation. There is further work that has been done in the introduction on the effects of early warning systems that you can actually find in some of the previous publications that are related that is given in this specific question. But just to conclude the presentation and the case study, something that is really fascinating about this assessment is our capability that takes me to one of the first slides. So we have an enormous set of resources. We have numerical models. We have the possibility to collect expert opinions. We have the possibility to introduce experimental observations, lab observations, field observations. And what we need is a systematic method that allows us to improve our inferences and to make these inferences unique irrespective of the source of result. And I think that's the main objective of the technical committee of this of International Society of Science. I think with this, we complete the presentation, and I want to thank you for your participation in this webinar. I want to thank also the International Society and in particular Marshall, who you know that he has spent a significant amount of time not only putting together the presentation but discussing about the technicalities of the presentation that has been
No, I would like to add that it's been a pleasure. Once again, thank you for inviting me to participate. I hope that what we have shown will prove to be valuable. I would like to, from an operational point of view, I would like to say, make the statement that there is not one correct way of performing a risk analysis and another incorrect one, provided that you stick with your reference framework, that you are consistent with your definitions, that you are rigorous in defining your elements of risk, your reference system, your return period, and that you basically document every step of your quantitative risk analysis so that somebody else may pick up your results and use them for comparative purposes and for practical management and for the preservation of the human valued assets. That's it. Thank you once again.
Would you like to start the webinar?
Yes, thank you both very much for your presentation. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Please stay tuned for a few other details